Hello, everyone. Welcome to Astrologer Climate Witness. Today, what I'm going to be reading are a couple of different things. One, I'm going to start with an astrological reading from this particular book. It is oriented toward understanding our relationship to our environment, the piece I'm going to be reading, which is excellent. And then I have a blog that I'm going to read of someone I've been reading for a long time, and I will post that so that you yourself can go, because there's a lot of things highlighted that you could take from there and further study. And that particular blog is about is completely science-based. There's no astrology in that, but this is going to be showing more of what our relationship to the environment is experiencing. We are experiencing a new relationship to our environment. Too bad we couldn't have changed our relationship to our environment a long time ago. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. Your environment and you. A man may be thought of as an individual soul manifesting in and through a body. But even the religious persons are coming to realize that you cannot, in fact, separate the individual from his natal environment. This is not to say that a man is the creature of his environment. It only means that individual and environment are two constantly interacting factors. Okay? Remember, I've said before, where we have little systems within our whole body system, right? The limbic system, electrical, the neural system. And then we are in a system, a family dynamic system, and then we're in a community, and we're in a state, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So the individual person is born in a social as well as a biological and planetary environment. If we believe in some form of reincarnation, whether of a transcendental soul or a bundle of karmic tendencies, whatever is born needed the exact kind of environment in which it was born, and the environment needed as well this new being. Every newborn has a potential function to perform in the total evolution of mankind and of the earth, and he is born at the time and place because he needs the life conditions they provide to the fulfillment of his karma or soul purpose. The third house and its contents refer traditionally to whatever a newborn finds around him. It was particularly connected with brothers and sisters and all near relatives, but this is obviously a simplification. What is meant is essentially the type of experience which arises daily from contacts with other human beings with whom one is related by blood, culture, or social tradition. In polar opposition to this type of experience, the ninth house refers to experiences involving long journeys, contacts with foreigners, and all relationships, the character of which implies a remote, generalized, or transcendent ideal of association. Here again, what the psychologically oriented type of astrologer has in mind is not as much a description of what the child meets around his earliest steps, but his attitude toward these meetings and their result upon the development of his thinking and feelings. The young child receives an immense variety of impressions to which he reacts, and his reactions are at first in terms of self-preservation and adjustments. The latter involves cunning, the most primitive form of intelligence, that is, the ability to use other people to bring pleasure and avoid discomfort or pain. Intelligence at this stage is purely self-centered. It seeks to make of all environmental factors, people, animals, nature in general, a secure, thus integrated whole of which the child is the center, at least in his own consciousness. If he cannot succeed in this instinctive purpose, he often withdraws into an imaginary world, plays with unseen playmates, etc. Today, many people's thoughts are drawn to ecological problems. Our society has insidiously poisoned our natural environment. What can we do to survive successfully in it? Shall we react by moving to as yet unspoiled places, living on the fringe of our relentless society and building our own ideal world as small groups of imaginative individuals? Or should we try to change this deleterious, greed-infested Western civilization by all possible means? But what kind of means? Organized socio-political action or sporadic explosive violence? I'll read that sentence again. But what kind of means? Organized social political action or sporadic explosive violence. Some children are extraordinarily clever at playing father against mother, sister against brother, becoming the center of attraction and decision. Others go into tantrums and become neurotic, another way of getting attention and also of exerting revenge. As always, the question to meditate upon is what your attitude should be when meeting problems caused by your environment. Some problems seem strictly personal, yet we are all involved in collective or group patterns of existence. We are caught in the karmic wheels of history. Our birth chart may suggest not so much a way out as a way through. Intelligence is the way. And then the second part, the ecological approach to knowledge. Intelligence is the ability to adjust one's environment to one's environment so that one may extract from it optimal conditions for personal growth and creative self-fulfillment. But there are various ways of adjusting. What is to be adjusted actually is the relationship between the individual person and the social and natural environment. This relationship should be just or right, thus fulfilling and not impairing the essential nature of either the individual or the environment. Unfortunately, our biblical tradition has promoted a basically unsound attitude toward the environment. Man alone is worthwhile, and all that surrounds him is there for him to master as he pleases. When this drive to mastery pervades intelligence and dominates the mechanisms of the mind, tragedy is the end result, as we've been seeing. We have reached that stage. This puts in question the whole concept of knowledge. It forces us to distinguish between optimum and maximum in terms of knowledge, between the best and the most. Making such a distinction is certainly dangerous, but not making it may be even more dangerous. It should be made in terms of intelligence and not of the proud urge for mastery, which Western civilization still officially glorifies as the one means for achievement and success. But what is success? Lincoln said that insofar as he refused to be the slave of any master, he likewise refused to be a master of slaves. Mastery is based on the use of power, and we say that knowledge is power. But is there not an optimum value to power beyond which its use will be destructive to all concerned, including the user? Only intelligence can determine this optimal value, and this means that what is to be considered is the relationship between the individual and nature or society, and not the craving of the individual for power and mastery over his natural and social environment. Intelligence leads to wisdom, intellect to knowledge. Wisdom implies the ability to understand when to stop inaction, and which endangers the relationship between the self and the not self, between man and nature. Man should transform nature by cultivation and domestication, but only as far as the transformation does not endanger the ecological harmony of the whole biosphere. How to learn how far one can go. And we can see really that, we've gone. It's ridiculous how far beyond we've gone. You can't have 8 billion people on this planet and do what we're doing. As the young child comes in contact with brothers, sisters, friends, animals, and to him, confusing world of adults, he learns how far he can go without incurring punishment or pain. Will our society, acting as an ill-tempered child seeking to dominate his family circle, learn to be intelligent in dealing with his planetary environment? Will it cease racing after an intellectual and analytical knowledge geared to the drive for a kind of power which has been unable to use without destroying itself and nature? An individual may often learn from his birth chart what is best approach to the development of intelligence. That is, the attitude and the type of situation which led to a most wholesome wholesome adjustment to his environment. When his natal third house contains planets, these usually indicate the best line to pursue in an attainment of the most primary type of knowledge. Well, it's anyone, because we all have a third house, okay? And we have transits through and progressions through. The only thing I have there is Lilith and Pisces, and it's intercepted. Okay, now that we've gone through this, I would like to read an article from a blog called Problems, Technology, and Predicaments by Eric Michaels. Okay. I'm going to state here, as I should every time before I start, that if you are having an extreme amount of stress and you're finding it difficult to deal, and you can't take all that much without becoming physically or mentally uncomfortable, maybe you shouldn't listen to this particular article. So this is called, Are You Ready for Collapse? And this was written September 25th, okay, before the hurricanes. So the people in the spheres that I run in, including many climate scientists, although I don't know any personally, I'm saying the ones that I've been reading for years, etc. This is where we're at. Recently, I have seen a string of articles and videos that repeat the same basic theme, that within the next 5 years we face umpteen different symptoms of collapse. I don't like attempting to attach timelines to any of this, and so I am simply repeating the theme that I see in all of these articles. None of this is my own assessment. I will say that I agree with the assessments. We're running out of road, folks. As for whether anyone is ready or not, I think very few, if any, truly are. We've been discussing this for decades. Now the time is drawing near for issues to develop that will be extremely difficult for society to deny, although people will still will, because that is what we do. Okay. I mentioned most of this in my recent article about our actual reality. That's in blue, my recent article about reality. Okay, that's further up. So if you open this up when I put it in, you can find that. Still, the warning bells are getting louder. This article from Alex Friedman mirrors my own feelings about the situation. Quote, the only way I can see this being prevented or the end of oil delayed a few years is if a government has already developed effective bioweapons and doesn't care if their own population suffers as well. Now, granted, I want to say this is an educated guess that this person is saying. No one's going around with this conspiracy saying, oh yeah, they're trying to kill us. I mean, that goes, there is that to a certain degree, maybe down the road. It's not, and if there is anybody out there now up in power and money, thoughts are possibly there, but whether that's happening now, not really. Although I do believe that some at the top have all along thought, okay, climate change, biodiversity loss. Yeah, okay, I'm rich, I can make a bunker, and I'll probably survive, and I don't care if the rest of them don't. So in a way, by continuing the use of fossil fuels and trying to prop up industrial civilization with renewables, that is kind of a way to say, well, I don't care if the rest of them drop dead, because that'll leave fewer people and there'll be less of a problem. Okay. But so far, it's not really a direct hit toward the rest of us. We shall see. Okay. The only way I can see this being prevented, I said that. Okay, so this is continuing the quote. I feel crazy to have just written this very dire paragraph with just a few of the potential consequences, but the shark fin curve made me do it. So she's saying this, Alice Friedman, excuse me. She's basically saying because the shark fin curve, which is the Seneca Cliff, you're up with everything and then down the other side. It's not, she's talking about a possible not slow progressive down collapse, but a falling off the cliff, Seneca Cliff. Even though I've been reading and writing about peak everything since 2001 and the rise and fall of civilizations for 40 years, it is hard for me to believe a crash could happen so fast. It is hard to believe there could ever be a time that isn't just like now. That there could ever be a time when I can't hop in my car and drive 10,000 miles. I can imagine the future all too well, but it is so hard to believe it. Believe it, she says. It is difficult. All right, quote's over. It is difficult to believe, isn't it? Part of this is because we don't want to believe it. I'm not sure I'm concerned about being able to hop in a car and drive 10,000 miles. I'm more concerned about the supply chains that provide all of our everyday needs. While I'll miss the ability to go on trips to the mountains, I can still be happy as long as the medical supplies and food doesn't run out. Electricity would be nice too. Oh, sorry. Although I'm well aware of what collapse means, that nothing can no longer be guaranteed. Oops, let me say that sentence again. Electricity would be nice too, although I'm well aware of what collapse means, that nothing can be taken for granted. Once medical supplies can no longer be guaranteed, disease will skyrocket. It is important to keep in mind that collapse is not a single event over a short period of time. It is a long-term loss of complexity. Sure, a nuclear war would reduce industrial civilization very quickly through a nuclear winter, but even that would take months to play out, if not years. While writing this, I came across this article from Ugo Barde saying more of the same. Many people within the overshoot collapse community are talking louder and louder about it. Here in this article from Eric Lee, he explains what transformity is and why it matters. Basically, this is the biophysical reality of the economic system. There are some key quotes in the article, including these three. The last one cracked me up. Okay, he said that, not me. Modern techno-industrial MTI society is an entropy maximizing dynamic, a dissipative, complex, adaptive system that selects for its dissipation, in parentheses, its end like all whirlwinds end, i.e., is not evolvable for the same reason a whirlwind or metastatic cancer within a somatic system body is non-evolvable. Okay, let me read that again for you. Modern techno-industrial society is an entropy maximizing dynamic, a dissipative, complex, adaptive system that selects for its dissipation, its end, like all whirlwinds end, is not evolvable for the same reason a whirlwind or metastatic cancer within a somatic system is non-evolvable. Okay. For the same reason. So there's no going back, basically, is what they're saying. You know, it's difficult for it to evolve into something better or usable or functional. That's what she's getting at, I think. Gold is a scarce natural resource, still in the quotes. So are fossil fuels of much higher transformity than biomass would form. Wood food. Oh gosh, let me say that again. Gold is a scarce natural resource. So are fossil fuels, and in parentheses, of much higher transformity than biomass, wood, food, that's biomass, okay. Which should have been mostly left in the ground, the oil, the gold, and sipped on for the next million years, instead of being dissipated by trains, planes, automobiles, cargo ships, military transport, and to make the vast quantities of consumables to the maximum growth in the 20th and 21st centuries to perhaps ensure the Anthropocene mass extinction event will rival that of the Permian. But modern humans are not smarter than yeast, nor are they adapted to one-off plague phase overshoot. Yeast just sporulate, and modern humans will just die off. Sorry about that. Hall is the founder and instigator of today's best guess science-based economics, which has yet to replace conventional pretend economics at all levels. from high school AP classes to elite universities. For some lack of reason, the science of economics is called biophysical economics, bitches. That's all in parentheses. All right, out of them. The word bitches had me in stitches. It's only too true about most economics being pretend science, and most of us have known this for a long time. Infinite growth on a finite planet just doesn't compute no matter how one looks at it or keeps trying. Meanwhile, while writing this, I came across a couple of brand new articles also adding to the mix, including this one from Gail Tverberg. Another excellent article by Art Ehrman likewise provides articulation and analysis about these upcoming changes. Strangely enough, most of the society seems to be caught up in politics and nonsense, bread and circus. Locally, talk still focuses on growth despite the reality that there hasn't been any real growth since 2018 before the pandemic. People know this, being that their paychecks may have gotten bigger but have not made up for the increase in prices on necessities. At the same time, taxes have also gone up. So while gross pay for many has gone up, net income is still down. While people know intuitively that the economy isn't doing well with a continuous stream of restaurant and retail bankruptcies, what we constantly hear from the news is that inflation is easing, the economy is great, and hundreds of thousands of jobs are constantly being created. Of course, this is the narrative that the mainstream media wants to express, but the actual reality is that economic growth and jobs and prosperity for all are over. The trajectory is going to be downward for most everyone, with the possible exception of those at the top, the billionaire class, who are busy extracting wealth from the rest of us at record rates. This, in parentheses, in blue highlight, is known as catabolic collapse, made popular by John Michael Greer. He's also famous for the maxim, collapse now and avoid the rush. It's kind of what I'm trying to do. Many different articles can be found regarding this phenomena, but here's the wiki for it. In blue highlight. Surprisingly, I even found a song for it. To be honest, it reminds me of this song by Repanation and Kim Mazal. In the first article by Greer, he points out just how long collapse has been ongoing in the United States. Quote, the date in question is 1974. That was the year when industrial heartland of the United States, a band of factories that reached from Pennsylvania and upstate New York straight across to Indiana, Michigan, began its abrupt transformation into the Rust Belt. Hundreds of thousands of factory jobs, the bread and butter of America's then prosperous working class, went away forever, and state and local governments went into a fiscal tailspin that saw many basic services cut to the bone and beyond. Meanwhile, wild swings in the markets for agricultural commodities and fossil fuels, worsened by government policy, pushed most of rural America into a depression from which it was never recovered. In the terms I've suggested in this post, the U.S. catabolized most of its heavy industry, most of its family farms, and a good half of so of its working class, among other things. It also set in motion the process of catabolization, one of the most important resources it had left at that time, the oil reserves of the Alaskan North Slope. That oil could have been eked out over decades to cushion the transition to a low-energy future. Instead, it was pumped and burned at a breakneck pace in order to deal with the immediate crisis of the 70s, when the United States oil production tanked and we had to bring in oil from other places. And then we developed the Alaskan oil. Many people aren't aware of this fact. Even the folks who lived it may not have really understood why all the factories were moved to other locations of the world where labor was cheaper and the environmental laws lax and non-existent. It was the end of innocence for many people. Even Peter Zahan is getting in on the action, although he appears to be convinced that it's just a Mexican thing. This is what I find humorous, the obvious bias going on with certain analysts. For instance, I often see different videos or articles with Dmitry Orlov going into his view of collapse in the U.S., and while he is correctly critical of the U.S. in many respects, he seems to be blind that collapse is going to affect people everywhere, including Russia, in parentheses. not just the US. It most certainly won't be distributed evenly or at the same time, but affect everyone in one way or another. It definitely will. While it may be true that Russia is better prepared for collapse, especially since they already went through a major one, this doesn't mean that some consequences will be escaped altogether. Still, Russia is much better prepared culturally, I think, to weather most aspects of collapse. You can read up on that. The Soviet Union already went through a collapse. Well, it collapsed, and now we have the Russian government that's there now, and there was a definite economic collapse after that, and from 1989. Okay, that brings us to the final aspect of all of this: belief. As David Pollard points out, here in one of his recent articles, we believe what we want to believe despite the facts. Quote, I have long argued that we believe what we want to believe, what fits with our existing conditioned worldview, not necessarily what aligns in any way with the facts or evidence, with what we see. That doesn't mean that we're all witless. There are sound evolutionary reasons why human brains are conditioned to find patterns and to disregard what doesn't fit with those patterns, to dismiss things and not see them at all if we can't make sense of them. There is much more to that article. I highly recommend reading it in its entirety. Understanding where we truly are based upon the facts rather than hype is important. The rosy stories are about to end, as this article from 2023 quote explains, quote, the most crucial development in global oil markets is depletion in the Permian Basin. That's down in Texas, folks. Okay. We first warned about this in 2018, predicting the Permian would peak in 2025. In retrospect, our analysis was too conservative. We now believe the basin could peak within the next 12 months. So this was written in 2023. Okay, it's now 2024. The implications will be as profound as was the United States oil production peaked in 1970, starting a chain of events ultimately sending prices up fivefold over 10 years. If we are correct, this could not come at a worse time for oil markets. Inventories are tight, production in the rest of the world is declining, and investors are incredibly complacent. Whenever we make long-term thematic predictions, we construct a roadmap of things we should expect to see. Since price is rarely a good proxy for fundamentals, we need hard data that confirms we are going down the right path, even during the inevitable periods when the oil price is moving against us. Based upon our original work back in 2018, we concluded the Permian would roll over once operators drilled most of their best Tier 1 locations. Before peaking, per well productivity would fall as operators drilled lower quality inventory. This is what has happened. For the first time, productivity per lateral foot registered a 6% year-on-year decline in the Permian. According to our models, this proves the industry has drilled its best wells. Basin-wide production decline is likely not far behind. With the Eagle Ford and the Bakken unable to grow over the last 18 months, Bakken is North Dakota, South Dakota, in that area. They squeeze the shale rock and get oil out of it. Okay. With the Eagle Ford and Bakken unable to grow over the last 18 months, once the Permian rolls over, the shale revolution will shift from growth to decline, and Hubbard's curve will emerge with a vengeance. Look up Hubbard's curve if you want to know more about that. Once again, take some time to enjoy this time we have before conditions worsen. Reconnecting with nature is a sure way to feel good at the same time. So if you need some inspiration, places like McNeil Mill, as pictured here, is a great start. Oh, because he goes on these sites to national parks. That's what he was talking about. Okay, so that's Problems, Predicaments, and Technology by Eric Michaels. That's his blog. And you really want to look that up because he's got sources that you can look up after you read his articles and everything, so to back everything up. So that's about it for today, folks. A couple of things I saw in there. I mean, especially younger people should really learn about the 1970 oil embargo and why all of that happened. The United States reached peak oil, and well, it had reached peak oil and it was starting to slope down. So we had to get oil from other places. And it wasn't just because we couldn't, the government wasn't letting us drill. We really didn't have the conventional sweet crude underneath the ground that we needed. Okay. And we didn't start to come back with the oil until we did offshore drilling, and then now the Permian in Texas, and then also the Bakken Shale. It's not, they came up with that technology to get that oil from the Bakken Shale. So thank you for coming here today. And anybody have any questions, please go ahead and talk to me. And I'd love to have a conversation. Everyone have a great evening, and hopefully see you soon.